These players have been practicing, preparing, and are ready for this moment. This is their biggest moment so far in their Pokemon career, really looking to make a name for themselves. And there is no better way to do that than to become a regional champion. Now, of course, we saw Brandon on stream earlier, has a lot of great placements within the last 3 years. Since Pokemon Return, has been very active. Of course, we noted, been playing that Roaring Moon deck a lot, but now has shifted over after this top 16 finish, after the rotation, to playing Lugia V-Star, paired with everyone's favorite bird, Archeops.
Yeah, the perfect pair, if you will. Both of those cards from Silver Tempest have been taking names since they got released. But of course, we have to take a look at his opponent, Zane Graham. Let's see what achievements he does have so far. A top 8 at the Los Angeles Regional Championships. A fantastic achievement so far. And it seems like a crowd favorite once again.
Yeah, you can't leave that empty. You've got to add potentially even more. Let's not forget that top 8 is at minimum going to be a top 4
it's
walking
already
away
at
for
top
this.
4, right?
Who knows? That would be a statement piece. Doing it with Lugia V-Star, your only major accomplishment being with a first place finish at a regional championships. We saw Alexander Flatos do that earlier on in the year.
With Lugia too.
Exactly. So is that the statement for this year here, Pablo? Do it in style, do it with Lugia. Let's look at these prize cards, see if there's anything super relevant. There is an Archeops in the prizes. That's, of course, why you play the maximum 4 copies. 1 piece for each of these players of that Chinchino line, but nothing looks too powerful, nothing looks too important. I think we're going to have a good set here, Pablo.
Yeah, the boss's orders are also inaccessible places as well. Perhaps if we go into a single prize trade-off, that third Cinchino pink prize for Zane could come into play. But other than that, as you mentioned, nothing super relevant. Maybe the Archeops could make it a little bit different, but I think we're getting this started. Let's see who is going to be the Lugia winner as Zane starts us off here.
Let's get action kicked off. Zane going first in the Lugia Mirror, a big advantage. It's of course going to come down to, can he get that turn 2 Summoning Star? There is going to be that V-Guard attachment. Now that can protect against some math. For example, if your Lugia V does not evolve, it will protect it from an opposing Tempest Dive. We're going to start flipping. Expect to see a lot of coin flips through this series. And it does flip a Tails. You always really want to see those heads early on in the game because, of course, the name of the game, get those Archeops, put them in the discard pile, put them into play with that Summoning Star V-Star power.
Unless you go grab Luminion, get that Jack supporter, and combine that with an Ultra Ball, and all of a sudden, you're fully set up. We lost Professor Burnett to their rotation, but Jack is here to replace her. So it'll be interesting to see what Zane chooses. I couldn't take a look at what else he has in his hand. He has that pretty concealed from my view. But yeah, as you mentioned, as a Lugia player, you have one goal on turn 1. Get a Lugia down and get as many Archeopses in the discard as possible. That's sometimes very tough to do on turn 1, but turn 2, it's fair game.
The coveted Ultra Ball double Archeops. Definitely a lot harder to do now than when Lugia first came out, but it is still possible. I'm sure these players would be loving to see that now of all times here in the top 4 of the regional championships, the last one of the year. Who will be our regional champion? And now the question, do you ever put this other Lugia down? I'm not sure I love putting Lugia down in this spot. There's really no reason to, especially if you don't know what your opponent's got cooking, but it is going to be benched. What do you feel about that here, Pablo?
Yeah, as you mentioned, I'm not a big fan. There's nothing that really threatens you. I mean, if you have 2 Lugia V-Stars in your hand, then maybe there's justification, right? If Zane has identified that he prized Ace in Chino and is possibly trying to eye up Lugia V-Star as an attacker. Maybe his hand is so bad that he knows he's already going to go read the win next turn. But then if you get Iono'd, right, yes, you lose the Lugia, but then you get a fresh new hand, which possibly leads to the Archeops being able to be discarded.
So Brandon playing his own Capturing Aroma. He will flip heads, so can search out for any evolution Pokemon he so chooses to. Immediately, Archeops, a prime selection for this first turn. Just checking to make sure there are multiple Archeops in the hand, multiple Archeops that can be put there via the searching cards that Brandon does play. It's all going to be about setup. It's all going to be about getting these Archeops discarded on these early turns.
Now, let's talk about the differences between these 2 lists, because on paper they look very similar, but there are a few subtle differences that could give the edge to one player or the other. Zane not choosing to play the Snorlax in his deck list, which is a pretty good decent one price attacker, and now the ace spec. Zane is playing that consistency master ball ace spec, whereas Brandon is playing that prime catcher that we saw come in so clutch in his previously streamed game.
Consistency versus aggression. It's going to be a theme to really watch throughout this set. As Brandon is just finishing up his deck search, making sure he understands what cards are available. It's actually going to be the Lugia V-Star taken off of this Capturing Aroma. Is there a Jock in hand? There is a Jock. Does not even need to use Luminion, just opening that one copy in the hand. And okay, Pablo, with these two Arceus being grabbed, there is an Ultra Ball. The fabled turn 1 Ultra Ball away, double Archeops. If you're Zane here, you've got to be maybe wincing a little bit, looking back, saying, yeah, this is really not what I want to see. Even though my opponent's going second, my start really matches in no way in comparison to what Brandon has been able to do on this first turn. There's no Luminion in play even to do this. Has the Minccino in the active spot, even has the Lugia. We could be seeing a whole bunch of options at this point. And even Brandon not immediately grabbing Lugia V means that he can actually just grab any other Pokemon he wants or use that Call for Family attack. So that shows that Brandon has options to work with the following turn.
Yeah, I think that Minccino pretty much signifies that Brandon might already have the Lugia V-Star in his hand, and he'll be able to Call for Family for the Lugia V. I can't quite take a look. Both players concealing their cards. But yeah, off to the races for Brandon. Picture perfect start that we've talked about. But can Zane keep up? Because currently there are 0 Archeops in his discard pile.
And it is slightly risky to only get one Lugia V here because there is a world where you could get knocked out this turn. If your opponent's holding on to a few Archeops in hand and then has like Ultra Ball plus either Luminion or Boss or Lugia V-Star, then that would be able to knock out your solo Lugia. It's a risk I feel like is worth taking, especially when your opponent hasn't showed much, but it is something that you've got to maybe sort of hiding a little bit, saying, all right, please don't have the absolute crazy combination here. Please just don't do anything with this deck. Maybe read the wind, take some time for yourself. I'll come in, I'll clean up your Lugia for you. Don't worry about that.
Yeah, and the game of Pokemon is all about those calculated risks, right? You have to determine whether it's viable, whether it's not viable. We do see the Luminion hit the field. Now probably gonna find, ideally would love to do the same thing, Jack into Ultra Ball, into establish your Lugia V-Star. You don't get to boss the Lugia V, but you get fully set up. However, seemed like Zane was eyeing up the Iono, so it might just be the starting hand for both players that really determines who gets an advantage this time around.
That is not what you want to see, and definitely a sigh of relief for Brandon. You get your hand refreshed, you know that there's a very low percentage that Zane will be the one to take the first prize card in this matchup. Doesn't have any Archeops in the discard pile so far. We'll just be seeing 6 cards. All of those cards in Zane's hand will go to the bottom of the deck. Zane is going to have to find a very solid 6 cards here. At minimum, at least 1 Archeops to read the wind away this turn. Otherwise, even as it stands right now, with just 1 Minccino in play, if there's the potential for Brandon to just start chasing after Minccino throughout the game, this is really where it becomes interesting. Do you go after the prize cards, or do you go after the main attacker? It's really going to come down to what Brandon has in hand and what he feels like is a better chance for winning this first game.
Yeah, but Brandon only needing 1 Lugia Vista, right, which he has 3 copies of, or the Ultra Balls, or even the Capturing Aromas potentially, whereas Zane needs so much more. We're going to see this Great Ball, see if that can even find an Archeops, what else is in the hand. But, I mean, now, of course, this extra Lugia V getting benched is pretty good for Zane. He definitely had the foresight to do that in the previous turn. Let's see what the Great Ball finds here, Ethan.
And he's really thinking about it here. I'm not sure there's a great target to take. It looks like considering maybe a Lugia V-Star to go to the hand to allow yourself to use that Summoning Star on the following turn.
All right, seems like the Pokemon has been chosen. It is that Lugia V-Star, I believe. Yep, it seems to be the Lugia V-Star. But is there no Archeops for you to use Read the Wind here? That's so rough.
Oh, there's an Ultra Ball in the hand. Would have loved to find Archeops to discard. And it looks like there is none. That's definitely the first card you just slam down. I mean, Technical Machine Devolution, another card you definitely slam down in this matchup. It's not going to have any use.
Yeah, that gift energy being gone is also a pretty important resource, right, for those late-game Iono protections. Technical Machine Devolution, not a card that's going to be relevant at all, probably in this matchup. There is a universe where you hit your opponent's Lugia for 220 damage, hit the other one, and then TMD one, you get 4 prizes over the course of 3 turns. But realistically, still going to happen too often. TM Devo, more of a tech card against Charizard and against other decks for sure. I'm sure Zane has found a lot of use throughout the tournament for it, but so far we're just going to see a Read the Wind, and you're barely keeping up with your opponent at this point, who is almost ready to go and is about to take their first 2 prizes if they can find Lugia V-Star and Cinccino.
Or even a boss's orders here to just have that as an access. You can take out the Lugia, and since you have double Minccino on board, you're more than okay to start the 2-prize trade, even if your opponent can respond back. It just comes down to how many gusting cards you can play. That V-Guard coming in a little bit clutch here, as we'll see Read the Wind, discard the Archeops, draw 3 cards, and immediately has the Lugia V-Star in the hand. Doesn't even need to search for it, and it will now come down to what other cards Brandon has in hand. Could even just evolve this Minccino into Cinccino, and then from there, the V-Guard energy is ignored, and you can take this first knockout and do it with a 1-prize Pokemon.
Setting up those Archeops, not having played a supporter yet. I mean, taking down the Minccino would be pretty good. I think taking the first 2 prizes is just the way to go here for Brandon. Whenever you trade a single prize Pokemon such as Cinccino into a 2-prize Pokemon, you know you're coming out ahead. So really off the races here for Brandon. We're going to see an Ultra Wall getting rid of the Iono. So we could see the Cinccino getting set up and a Boss's Orders play perhaps.
Well, then begs the question here, Pablo, do you just go after the Minccino and make sure that you're not being threatened? Maybe this makes sense if you can re-pivot into that Lugia V-Star. That way you can just protect your Cinccino for when later on another 2-prize Pokemon comes up that you want to knock out.
Yeah.
No.
All right, seems like we're just going to go on the aggressive for Brandon. Take these first 2 prize cards. Not going to use Iono to disrupt your opponent unless he already has another Iono, but as mentioned, both players keeping their hands very well concealed from each other and also from us, the casters.
They love making our job hard, Pablo. I know they're thinking, wow, wouldn't it be funny if the casters had a harder job?
Had no idea
the
what I'm trying to do.
They're going to love this one. So we'll see the Primal Turbo number 2 be used. Thinking about what special energies are worth putting down, and I like this play. You know that Minccino is going to be your main Pokemon you want to get powered up, eventually evolve that into Cinccino. And we're going to be seeing a turn 1 knockout. This does signal there's probably an energy card in the hand. Special roll on turn 2, 280 damage. This is what you dream of, especially in a high-stakes situation like top 4.
Yep, the only card that would make this setup better would just be another Cinccino right here. But perfect start for Brandon, fully max rarity as well, it seems. So can't ask for much more.
Yeah, and just not playing a supporter card that turn. Just discarding the Iono, maybe just has other supporters like Boss to hold on to for the following turn, and knows that Zane is pretty pipelined into either playing something like you mentioned, the Jock to find those Archeops, or something like Professor's Research to discard that. So I actually kind of like this play here for Brandon. You're never forced to play supporter cards, so just play a little bit conservatively. And the clock is ticking now here for Zane. Zane needs to find a response knockout this turn. Otherwise, Cinccino is just going to roll out of control and use that special roll to just knock out every Pokemon Zane has in play, and the prize lead is going to become unsurmountable.
Now, Zane doesn't even have access to something like Snorlax to potentially return KO this Cinccino and not give up another 2 prizes. So does Zane give up on his one option for Cinccino as it currently stands, or does he use Lugia to take down the Cinccino, but then open himself up for a retaliation KO with the next Cinccino and allow Brandon to be up 4 prizes to 1? Neither scenario seems good for Zane, and that going first advantage seems to have completely gone away from Zane at this point.
Does finally flip heads on capturing Aroma, so that can find either the Lugia V-Star or another Archeops to get that second Archeops in the discard pile. But you've got to wonder, it feels like with this board, Brandon is the one who went first in this spot and has taken the first knockout, and that is really what this matchup comes down to. It's really just asking yourself, if you're Zane, sure, I could find everything I want this turn. I could find Lugia V-Star, double Archeops, another Minccino to put into play, but how do I ever win the prize trade back from this point if my opponent can just continue to streamline Minccinos, Cinccinos, and then attack with Lugia V-Star where it seems fit?
And Cinccino is really what gave Lugia V-Star new life, right?
Yeah.
Lugia V-Star had been pretty relegated to being a meh deck. It didn't really have the attacks. It had to resort to playing Earthen Vessel and Basic Energy, which go against the Archeops philosophy, if you will. But Cinccino came back, or came into the fray, allowed Lugia to come back. It might even get stronger with the new set, but we are seeing it be strong as a very good meta call this tournament. And I think Brandon is showing us why. Zane's struggling a little bit to get the full setup, the full value of that Summoning Star. We might even see a single Arceus hit the board here.
That just feels so devastating if you have to go for it, but you've got to figure out the best way to keep yourself in this game. There's not even something like another Chinchino to bring back, and it's just going to be the single Archeops, but even if you take a knockout onto this Lugia, a Lugia V-Star of Brandon's own to just boss his orders and target up that Archeops means that there is going to be little to no response to Zane in terms of getting attacker streamline for the rest of the game. So here we go, single Archeops, but with how things stand right now, the only way Zane can attack is if he doesn't have an energy card in his hand is to put two double turbo energy onto this Lugia V-Star, which yes, it will be enough to knock out Chinchino, but down the line, it's just not going to be a great option in terms of making sure you have things like Gift Energy on there, things like V-Guard Energy. This is going to be a very, very tough situation.
Very, very rough indeed. I do think I see one energy in hand. There is also a boss's orders to maybe match the fact that you have one Arceus and try to take down your opponent's Arceus, but Brandon already has a huge energy advantage. 4 energy here, 2 energy here, versus your measly 3 energy and 1 energy. So you really will never be able to keep up at that point.
Yeah, you would not only be losing the prize trade, but you would be losing the Archeops trade with just having 1 in play. And from there, Lugia V-Star, or rather Chinchino, isn't as intimidating when every turn you can throw 4 energy cards onto it. So with this combination of factors, just everything seeming to be going wrong here for Zane. There's the attachment for turn. We will see Chinchino go down, and Brandon will also get to draw a few cards here if his hand is not filled up already because of that gift energy attached to it.
I think your best hope here is for Brandon to whiff the Chinchino at this point in time to get the return KO on this Lugia. I really don't see any other line, but Brandon's going to get 3 extra cards from the gift energy activation before he even needs to consider who he brings up. And the Iono discard last turn probably indicates that Brandon's hand is actually quite good.
Yeah, I think I would honestly just be okay targeting solo Archeops here. I feel like that's probably just even a better play than knocking this out, because there's a world where just having 1 Archeops, you eventually do not have a Chinchino response, right? A Lugia V-Star comes up again, it knocks this out, and then you get into a weird trading game. I think this is just... I think it's, honestly, Pablo, it's a win-win. You're in a win-win situation. You knock this out, you go down to 2 prize cards, and then from there, Lumineon on the board is an easy prime target for those final 2 prizes.
Yeah, with 3 boss's orders, a copy of Serena, and the prime catcher, even if you get Iodo to 2, you're probably bound to find 1 copy. Does have that Chinchino backup, so I think just going 2/2 straightforward, no need to be fancy, take down the Archeops, leave energy on the board, then the Chinchino possibly goes down, and it could get a little awkward. You extend the time it takes for you to win. I like just going 2/2. You have to gift energies to protect from Iono. You know there's not going to be any sort of Temple of Sinnoh. Enhanced Hammer isn't even legal yet, so nothing stopping you from drawing extra cards. And you're also thinning the deck by 4 cards right here, possibly even more. So finding one of your 5 ghosting effects feels really reliable off of 7 from the gift plus your top deck. And you have Lumineon as well.
Yep, you still got the fish, you still got Lumineon.
Ultra Walls.
So many
everything.
options. Yeah, if this was not 75 minutes, I think Zane is maybe considering probably picking things up at this point, but you got to play out the opportunities. That's what the extra 25 minutes in this top cut grants these players. So we'll see Chinchino fully powered up, and from here, it's going to get very tough. Brandon's going to take a huge prize lead, especially if this Chinchino is the next Pokemon to get dealt with. And yes, Collapse Stadium is still a card you've got to think about. There are ways for this, or a way for Lumineon to be removed from the board. Of course, allowing both players, or forcing them rather, to discard until they have 4 bench Pokemon left, if they do not already have 4 bench Pokemon, or are filled up at 5. So we'll see exactly what happens here. Chinchino, prime to take this knockout, and we're going to see the attachment for turn onto the Lugia V-Star as well, meaning no matter what happens, next turn, a single Primal Turbo will power this Lugia V-Star up. Brandon not playing any supporter cards, not playing anything else out, is content with what is in the hand at the moment, and can use Special Roll to take another 2 prize turn.
Special Roll taking 2 prizes. Gonna draw 4 cards from the gift energy, potentially finding that Collapse Stadium, right? Zane would love to bench another Pokemon, Collapse Stadium this away, evolve the Lugia, and then maybe he stops Brandon from winning next turn, but he's still gonna be a little far behind, and with only 1 Archeops, it's really hard to keep up with the attach, with the energy in play to be able to even knock out the Lugia could be a little troublesome.
Zane's got his back against the wall. He knows what he has to do to pull this out. That's the start.
That's
Deal with
step
this
one.
Cinccino. You're going to need manual attachment, but even then, you need another. But the problem also is you need a 2-prize Pokemon, or a Pokemon that's not a 2-prize Pokemon to fill this last bench slot, because sure, you can put another Pokemon down and remove Lumineon, but having Lugia V is essentially just the same thing at this point. Yeah, and that's not what you want to see off this. You have all the evolutions you want. Still, Pablo, I'm not sure an extra basic here really makes a huge difference unless you have that collapse stadium.
Yeah, there's exactly one Pokemon that can fill up that bench spot. It's Minccino, because there is another copy or another basic Pokemon in Lumineon or the Mew EX, but that's it, right? So even if you have the collapse stadium, it's not easy to play. It was a head flip for the Archeops. I don't even know if it's in the hand, but it's not looking good for Zane in this game 1 of the top 4 match.
Got to play to your outs. You got to play what you've got. There's already 8 cards in hand for Brandon, so there's really no point to play Iono. It's just going to cycle those cards to the bottom unless you have information that Brandon's holding on to anything, but he hasn't given any information at this point. So we'll see the double turbo, the choice of the first energy, and then any other energy that provides colorless. The gift energy really doesn't matter in this spot. If the Lugia is knocked out, refilling your hand doesn't matter. The game will be over.
Now, there's no way for Brandon to take down the Lugia in this upcoming turn. There wasn't another Minccino bench, but Brandon hasn't played a supporter for 2 turns, did get to replenish the hand, does have so many costing options. I would put money on the fact that there is a boss disorders or some gusting effect awaiting in Brandon's hand to be able to take a knockout and close out the game. Well, there's a Master Ball that can get them in Minccino, but the Collapse Stadium. Both players do play a copy of that, but finding your one copy is not exactly easy with no direct way to search for it.
Nope, not easy at all. You see Zane just debating. Does the Mew EX do anything for me? Does it really make any changes? No, it doesn't. No, really, it's not going to be a huge game changer, it feels like, in this matchup. And maybe Zane just kind of accepting that the odds of finding this Collapse Stadium are so low, but will still give himself a chance. Find this Minccino, put it down, and Zane's going to have to maybe play some sort of supporter card. Iono would not be terrible, of course. Brandon's still going to end the turn off with 1 less card than he has in hand now. It's pretty much the same thing. And does have the Collapse Stadium.
Already had it. Okay. So Zane making sure he's going to make it as difficult as possible for Brandon to win this match. Now, Brandon can try to two-hit KO this Lugia. I think like the conditions now change to the fact that it's going to take an extra turn for Brandon to win, right? Oh, we do see an Aries, so there were plenty of boss orders in the hand. Not a single item card, however, so Aries, just take a look at your hand, and that's it.
And this is where the issue comes in is, yes, there's no immediate way to win the game this turn, but I think this is the turn now where you just play a boss's orders on the Archeops, knock it out, and then next turn there's no threat of a special roll. Or you target the one that has the gift energy, since an attachment plus Primal Turbo does not get you there. Especially since there's a risk that there's always a chance that Zane plays something like another Collapse Stadium in his deck and maybe does play Snorlax. There's a world where you can just have 2 of your turns essentially fully negated and Zane could come back into this game.
Yeah, you are completely right. So perhaps going after the bench, there is the Minccino seeing play. However, there's the Archeops coming into the active spot. There's not going to be any extra energies for Zane at this point in time. And without the Archeops backup, that special roll is not so special.
Not special at all. It's like a normal roll at this point.
It's normal roll, yeah, exactly.
Mediocre roll.
Mediocre roll.
Sufficient roll.
Not even sufficient, I don't think.
We're just dunking on Cinccino. What did Cinccino ever do to us, Pablo?
No, Cinccino is great when its body Archeops is also there, but at this point in time, I mean, Zane can potentially Iono. He sees that Brandon has the other boss already in his hand, so unless he can Iono, the game's essentially over. There's nothing that can one-KO this Lugia at this point in time. You can't even trap any of the bench Pokemon because there's just so many energies. This Lugia deck plays 16 or 17 energy on average, as we see 2 of them get attached to the Minccino. So Brandon in full control, being now 2 turns away, including this one, to close out game 1.
Didn't think a Lugia mirror match could take this long necessarily for a first game. I thought it would just be boom, 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 knockout back and forth, but it can be very in-depth, especially when a player misses a step, like not getting out the double Archeops in this case. A huge advantage, though, for Brandon in this game. Let's not get that wrong. He's going to commit this missed energy. I'm not sure I'm a huge fan of doing that in this spot. You want to make sure you do have energy to pivot out of the active spot, but if there's still an energy left in the deck, then I think this is okay here for Brandon. But you've always got to look at your lose conditions, and one of those could be double boss's orders, keep this Lugia up in the active spot, and force you to find a way to pivot out eventually.
You are completely right. You not only have to factor how you win, but you also have to factor into your decision making and resource management how your opponent could possibly win as well. Now, Zane, in a lose-lose situation, if he goes boss, KO the Minccino to protect the Lugia, then he's going to be in trouble. If he goes for the Iono, then that Minccino can evolve and potentially just knock out the Lugia V-Star with one more energy available. And there's not going to be the activation of the gift energy. Brandon's going to be drawing only a single card, but Brandon is under no pressure. Zane's still at 4 prizes. It's not like the Lugia, if that goes down, Zane wins the game. Zane still needs to find 4 prizes, 2 on the Lugia, and then 2 more on the single prize Pokemon on the bench.
Zane's going to need a miracle to pull this one off. No Archeops in play. These are important, though. Slowly getting manual attachments onto the Cinccino means, hey, eventually you could just get a one-hit knockout on a Pokemon, especially if you need to pivot out of this Lugia V-Star on the following turn. So there is still some life here for Zane, but let's see what happens here. Brandon will draw his card for turn. Does he have a boss's orders? No, there's a capturing Aroma, though, so if this flips tails, this could find Luminion, but no, it flips heads. And now the question is, do you even grab any Pokemon here off of this capturing Aroma, especially if you're looking to get gift energy? But this is actually just going to be the game here because it was a win-win either way. You grab the Cinccino, and if there's enough special energies here, but I actually don't know if there's... Oh, there is one. Okay, never mind. 3 energies already on there. Brandon saying, look, if I flip heads, I win. If I flip tails, I win. Which one would you like to call? Doesn't matter. I'm winning game 1. Yeah,
at this point, it felt like Zane was trying to do everything in his power to slow down Brandon from winning, right? It just make it as difficult as possible for him to win. But in the end, he was too far behind. Only a single Archeops, not enough powerful attackers, not enough energy in play. And now you have to wonder, Zane won the coin flip or potentially chose to go first. We'll find out. But do you choose to go first or second? Going first didn't really work out in this game 1.
I feel like you've still got to just hope you high roll in this mirror match, because if you don't go first and you let Brandon go first and he does exactly what he did on turn 2 instead of turn 1, it's the same situation, except he is not only still having a super solid setup, but he's also putting on the first aggression, taking the first prize cards. Everything went right for Brandon this game. Everything went wrong for Zane this game. It is Lugia we're talking about, so the winds can change very quickly. We'll see how things play out.
I mean, I'm pretty sure Brandon only played 2 supporters that game. 1 Jack on turn 1 and 1 boss's orders to take down the Archeops eventually. He didn't play any research. He didn't play any Iono. I'm pretty sure he got Iono'd by Zane into the Lugia V-Star after the perfect start with the Jack in hand. And that was it. Yeah, he just found everything he needed off of Capturing Aroma, off of Ultra Balls. Who needs supporters, right? Just Jack. Just play for Jack in your Lugia.
That's why Lugia is so good. Its board just stabilizes itself.
Yeah.
You don't need to dig through your deck and find attachments for turn. You don't have to use anything else besides your Primal Turbo abilities. So as soon as you put in all the hard work early on, you can kind of sit back, relax a little bit, and just be okay to swing away with your powerful attackers.
Now, of course, you have that fragile setup with your Archeops, but if you have enough threats on the board, your opponent cannot keep up with that, then you're going to run away with the game, and that's exactly what happened here for Brandon. Having 1 more Archeops is just too much of an advantage when you're playing the mirror match. So can Zane keep up in this game? Both players have basically the same deck. Zane's a little bit more teched out, does have an Arven in there, does have that Master Ball, does have that Technical Machine Evolution, so a little bit of variation, but in the grand scheme of things, both decks are built the same and trying to accomplish the same.
3 energy cards for both players and that Prime Catcher Ace-Spec in the prizes for Brandon. A few Ultra Ball there as well for Zane. Yeah, I think there's a 2-card difference. If you count the boss and the Prime Catcher as
2 Jets,
both
2
Gusting cards.
1 Gusting Effect, 1 Ultra Ball, 1 Pokemon Search. Yeah, pretty much mirror prizes. Now, Brandon does start with the Snorlax in the active. Zane starting with the Lugia. Can this Great Ball find something good to go with his hand? Ideally an Archeops for an Ultra Ball. Maybe, all right, Minchino is a good call, right? Depending on
Yep.
what the rest of the hand looks like, that Minchino on turn 1 is pretty good. Does open up the possibility to have like the perfect setup. Boss KO your opponent's single Lugia, which Brandon did take that calculated risk last game.
Yeah, and on the other side here for Brandon, starting Snorlax, it's sort of a double-edged sword. It's a Pokemon that you would be okay if Zane took a turn 2 knockout onto it. It's not the most important Pokemon to have down in this matchup, but at the same time, you really want to either use that Read the Wind or Call for Family on turn 1, so see what Brandon has in hand. Of course, Jet Energy can allow either of those Pokemon to be pivoted into the active spot. Let's take a look and see how Brandon can set this first turn off. Already in the tank here, thinking, how do I play this hand out? Is it really that bad, Brandon? Are you going to have to research this all away?
We're going to see a big research here, it seems. Is there nothing you can play down? That's 2 Ionos, 2 Energies, 1 Boss's Orders, and the Collapsed Stadium. So a little bit harsh, but no Archeops hitting the discard pile feels really, really awful there for Brandon.
You got to wonder if that trade-off was really worth it instead of just playing the Iono and saving those cards. Yes, you get 1 less card, but you get to save those resources, and it doesn't change. You aren't going to draw into any of those cards off the Iono. Does find 2 Minchino, but are there any Lugia V that can come down? That will set Brandon's potential up for the previous turn, or the following turn, rather, behind 1 turn. There is Ultra Ball away a single Archeops, but we're not seeing the second one get slammed down, and is even thinking about getting rid of Mew EX. It's a big liability, but Restart can bail you out of some pretty tight situations if you need it to.
Yeah, I'm guessing that hesitation was due to the fact that Brandon's hand might not be as good. Brandon does play 3 Professor's Research, does play 2 Iono, does play that Morty's Conviction, and that Serena, but after that harsh Research, there's 2 Research, the Serena, and the Morty's Conviction left in terms of draw supporters.
It's a big price to pay for 1 more card. Sometimes you've got to do what you got to do to make sure your deck is as many cards that find Archeops out of the deck as possible. We'll see if that comes back to bite Brandon in the back a little bit. Now the choice is, what Pokemon do you grab here? Do you get this Lugia V down? Do you think it's reasonable for yourself to get turn 2 Summoning Star with the cards you have in hand? Do you prepare to play another supporter that discards your hand and grab an Archeops? There's a lot of questions, but it really depends on what other cards Brandon is working with this turn.
Yeah, I think if you don't have the Lugia in your hand, it has to be that, even though you would love to get the other Archeops or whatnot. I mean, in an ideal scenario, you go Lugia and then Jet Energy, Read the Wind, but that opens up yourself for a potential knockout, and then you're out of Lugia. So I wonder what the other cards are, but I can't imagine they're very good if Brandon was hesitating on discarding that Mew EX with the Ultra Ball.
So both players sort of off to shaky starts so far. Only having 1 Archeops in the discard pile going second, and there's no Jet Energy, so no Call for Family action, no Read the Wind action. What do you have, Zane? What can you put together this turn? Are you able to do the Jock Ultra Ball combo? We know there's 2 Ultra Ball, though, in the prizes for Zane, so may have to really rely off of these supporter cards to discard Archeops from the hand, if he can even find these Archeops and put them into the hand in the first place.
No, I'm pretty sure Zane does have an Iono in his hand, because he just asked Brandon how many cards he had, but we're just going to see a Read the Wind for a single Archeops, not wanting to give any help to Brandon. Another slow start for Zane.
Does Brandon even have anything here in hand to work with? That's the question at this point. What do you even do? Your Snorlax is going to take at least 2 turns to power up if you want to commit energy cards to it. I mean, it could literally be a manual attachment war, but if you commit an energy to the Snorlax, it means a single attachment on this Lugia V next turn will knock it out. So things are getting very, very interesting. Thinking about putting this Lumineon into play. There is 1 Archeops in the discard pile, so this could grab a plethora of supporter cards. We could see that Morty's Conviction, but it's going to be the Jock. So, okay, if there is a Lugia V-Star and Archeops selected here and a way to discard this Archeops, then we could see Summoning Star fill the bench up, but your bench is just looking really awkward from here on out because you're going to be unable to chain Chinchinos from this point on.
Yeah, not being able to bench 2 Minchinos is a pretty big deal, so Lumineon is helpful, right? Jack is a good card, but Does Brandon even have an Ultra Ball to discard the Arceus right now, or is he just going to have to wait another turn to play possibly Mori's Conviction or another Research? Or is he relying on a top deck as well to find either of those cards?
He may just not have a better supporter, but I feel like if you have no better supporter to play, you might as well just ditch the hand and draw some more cards. So this is really tough. You see him sort of smile, say, what can I even do here? Is there maybe a Jet Energy plus Read the Wind action going on this turn?
I feel like if there was, the time to do it was last turn. We're not going to see any sort of attachment. I really wonder what is in Brandon's hand at this point. But now it's on Zane. Yeah, he can get an advantage here. He has extra cards with the Read the Wind. He already has one Arceus. Can he piece the other combo or the pieces here?
If he had Boss's Orders and a Lugia V-Star, something like Ultra Ball plus Boss's Orders, and that last Archeops he needs, hold on, there's a Master Ball in hand, so if Zane can knock out this lone Lugia, then he just can run away from this game if the pieces are there, but I'm not sure they are.
No, and unfortunately, because of the double turbo, that damage reduction, and Zane has already committed the attachment for turn on that miss, so he can't even retreat the double turbo, send the Lugia back, and then reattach a Jet Energy to send it back up. So he's going to be a little short, and based on the attachment, I don't think he has the Cinccino ready to go to knock out the Lugia, so might miss out on that despite going ahead in the prize cards no matter what.
And this is sort of an interesting spot to knock out this Snorlax because you then give not only an open bench space to Brandon, but you allow him to pivot into that Lugia to maybe Read the Wind things away. It kind of becomes a little bit of an interesting situation, but we're actually just going to see Professor's Research, and I have to believe that this card of the second Archeops there, especially if you're grabbing that Lugia V-Star.
It did. There's actually now 3 Arceus in the discard pile along with that Mew, a few energies, but now Zane in the driver's seat does have the 2 Minchinos to be able to chain them, will be able to start taking prizes, and hasn't seen much action from Brandon at all. No supporter played from hand. It was searched for by the Jack. No energy attached either. This will clear up the bench space for Brandon to potentially have 2 Minchinos down at once. So if Brandon responds with a Cinccino, knockout on the Lugia, and benches another Minchino, then he could be in a decent spot.
A little bit of small sequencing things there. Would have liked to see the Primal Turbo get used before this Great Ball. Take those energy cards out and give yourself a little bit of a bigger chance here to draw into that Cinccino. So we'll see what this Great Ball grabs. Sometimes, you know, the phrase never punished, always a great phrase. Sometimes you just like Cinccino too much and it just comes to you every time off this Ultra or off these Great Balls. Will still be Lugia V-Star. That's still a good card to have.
Yeah.
Protects your Lugia V from getting knocked out by something like a Tempest Dive on the opposite side. And we'll now start to see these Primal Turbos. Pablo, how would you like to see these energies distributed?
I would love to see 2 energy on each Minchino in case there's a boss KO on either. If you commit all the energies to 1, then that makes it too big of a target. Does decide to attach 2 and 1, which is a very interesting decision. Now Brandon could potentially take down one of the Archeops, and yes, he will have to deal with one fully powered up Cinccino, but then not too many to follow that up. So interesting spot. However, he does know Brandon hasn't done much, if at all, at this point in time.
I believe there's just 1 energy on that Minchino because we did see the, what was that? The Mist Energy attached for a turn.
Yeah.
So we'll make sure everything is up to date. So that Pokemon has 1 energy attached to it. We'll see the Lugia V-Star get evolved. It looks like Zane is content to just knock out this Snorlax with Tempest Dive, take the first prize card, and Brandon is going to look to take a 2 prize knockout in response, and I feel like he needs to do that to keep pace in this game.
Yep, has to have that positive 2-for-1 prize trade-off. Does have the Lugia V-Star in hand already. There is only 1 Arceus in the discard so far. We know there's another one in the hand. Can that get discarded? Yes, it can. Mori's Conviction coming into play. Gonna draw Brandon 5 cards, I believe. Right, 1 for each bench Pokemon, and gonna get the Archeops into a discard pile. Now, can Brandon bench another Minchino to have the ideal response?
This would be exactly what he needs. Sometimes it's not just about taking the first prize cards, but it's about taking the first 2 prize cards and really threatening a lot of pressure on your opponent's 2 prize Pokemon, forcing them to make some tough decisions. And this is exactly what Brandon needed. Yes, he falls behind in the prize trade, but it is for a good cause. Now Primal Turbo can accelerate 4 energy onto this Cinccino, and then especially if there's an attachment for turn, that means the Minchino on the bench can start to apply some serious pressure, knock out this Lugia V-Star, and put Brandon into the prize lead for this matchup.
Brandon's patience definitely paying off. He might have even like faked out that he had not as strong of a hand, had to go for the jack, right? Slowly piece out the Arceus into a discard pile. Very patient. Let Zane take that first prize card, and now he's gonna take the lead.
That's exactly what you want. Now, of course, you do have to get through the onslaught of one prize Pokemon, Minccino, on the bench for Zane. So it's going to come down to now Zane can knock this out, go to 4 prize cards left, and there are 4 prizes sitting on the bench here for Brandon. So it is still anybody's game at this point.
Certainly anybody's game. And that early research by Brandon did lose that collapsed stadium, right? So this Luminion is going nowhere. And now it's on Zane. If he can piece out the knockout on the Cinccino and then boss KO, he's going to have the lead right here, especially if he can do it with a single prize Pokemon, because Zane only has one Lugia V-Star, right? But Brandon can go 2-2, 1-1 in the prizes, and Zane can go 1-1, 2-2, and Zane got that first KO.
So we'll see what Pokemon Zane decides to promote this turn. Is there ever a situation where you don't promote the Minccino? I feel like, of course, you want special roll for later on, but with how the board is looking, you only need to use one big special roll attack to knock out that Lugia V-Star. You can kind of afford to just do 2 energy here, Primal Turbo someone to the bench. Don't overcommit, of course, since you want those resources, and then save that Lugia V-Star as a way to knock out that Lumineon to close the game out. Got to keep your eye on those resources you're down. And that was a big research for Brandon. And you could see he understands that was a great response to what Zane was able to do on that turn, but he is nowhere in a necessarily good spot because of the resources that hit the discard pile on turn 1.
Now, I know we have 75 minutes in Top Card, and that's more time, but these games are taking a while, right? And Zane does have that advantage at this point in time, but it's going to be at least 3 more turns for each player to be able to close out this game. And with 35 minutes on the clock, we might not have enough time left to see a Game 3 if Zane ends up winning this one, which he currently has all the advantage towards. Now, Zane did choose to bench a Luminion, opening up the possibility for Brandon to go 2-2-2 on the prize trade. So I wonder if Zane has the Collapse Stadium to go along with this and just get rid of that Luminion immediately.
You got to imagine, right? It would just give your opponent such a more reasonable out. Win the game in one less turn, and since the Luminion's already down, sure, you may not have as consistent access to getting rid of the Luminion, but I mean, it still just feels like you are okay going to 4 prize cards if it means you have your 2-turn route versus Brandon's 3-turn route to win this game. And it always is a question, though, since Brandon is at 3 prize cards, or rather at 4 prize cards, that there could be a world where in order for Zane to keep up the 2-2 aggression, that he's going to have to use Luminion to find boss, and that could disrupt the way that Brandon plays the game out if he can target Lugia V-Star down next turn.
Now we are also seeing a lot of shuffling and then going back into the deck, which is eating a lot of the time here. And that's the proper procedure, of course, but both players need to be very aware that they don't have infinite time, and especially Zane, if he wants to close out this game and have enough time to finish the next one, time is of the essence. Now, another reason why I don't like benching this Luminion is not only is it a liability now, but that's one less way you can find the Ghost to take down the Lugia and take down the Luminion, which Zane does need to pull off.
I didn't quite see it. Did you see what supporter card Zane grabbed with that Luminion?
This I don't know that he just played, which with the gift energy on the active, it's not going to be very impactful at all.
Yeah, maybe there's some energy cards that Zane's hand is filled with he needs to put to the bottom of the deck, but besides that, there really isn't a reason to disrupt the hand if you're going to just be refilling it back up here for Brandon. So hold on here. Zane would really like to find that Collapse Stadium. Is it worth it? Was this trade-off worth it? It's something you've got to be thinking about right now. Zane can go down to 4 prize cards, but now all of a sudden, Brandon is in the lead in terms of what he can do. Sure, there's more Cinccino on board here for Zane at this point, but it's pretty much almost even, especially if Brandon can continue to just bench Minccino every single turn.
Yeah, if Zane had not benched that Luminion, Brandon would win at best in 3 turns, just like Zane. But at this point in time, now Brandon can win in 2 turns, knocking out the Luminion, knocking out the Lugia, and we do know that Brandon plays 5 ghosting effects. There was 1 Boss's Orders discarded in that first Professor's Research in the beginning of the game, but there's still plenty available. However, the Prime Catcher is still priced, I believe.
So we'll see if we see this second Primal Turbo be used. I would like to see it at least put an energy onto this Chinchino, but it's not going to happen at all. We're going to see Special Roll, take the knockout. Brandon will fill the hand up to 7 cards, and now comes the big question. Can Brandon find a Boss's Orders and a Chinchino this turn to target down that Lugia V-Star, or even just target down... Well, that's the question here, Pablo, is depending on obviously what Pokemon you have. Let's say you have access to all the resources you want here. Which is the better Pokemon to go after this turn?
It's got to be the Lugia V-Star, right? Because if you use your Lugia V-Star to go after the Luminion and you only have one Minccino on the bench, which now there's 2, but if you only had one, then your opponent could take down that Cinccino and you have no way to take down the Lugia V-Star. But if you have the opportunity, it's got to be Lugia V-Star first into the Luminion. Now, did Brandon find the ghosting effect because the Cinccino's in the active? I do believe he did.
Yeah, and let's not forget, if Brandon takes his prize cards like he has been, he's going to draw into Prime Catcher this turn, which is always a card, even if it gets shuffled back into the deck, you can play Research and give yourself a chance to just draw into another gusting effect. Luminion already being down, definitely a little bit of a hit, since you're going to have a lot harder of a time finding that card later on. We'll see the first Primal Turbo. It will put 2 energy onto this active Chinchino, and then we'll see if we see either the Lugia V-Star or the benched Minccino get powered up. Either or feels like it's probably solid at this point.
With him eyeing up 2 energies, I feel like those are going to go into the Minccino or the Lugia V-Star. I would really prefer the Lugia V-Star just because you don't need too much else. Okay, seems like there wasn't any energy from hand, so has to commit the energies here. But as we see 4, I'm pretty sure this is a Lugia V-Star gone this turn.
And very interesting to not put a Jet Energy, instead wants to use another Gift Energy from this point on. I feel like having that resource could give you a little bit more flexibility around a card like Iono. Now you're stuck with just a single Gift Energy for the rest of this game since you've committed 2 to this active Chinchino. And that is the big question. Do we see Boss's Orders, or will it just be a knockout? We'll see the attachment for turn onto the Minccino. Come on, Brandon, show us. Do you got the boss? Do you have the gusting card? He does have the boss, and that will bring up the Lugia V-Star to the active. Special Roll now will put Brandon just 2 prize cards away from advancing into the finals here in Los Angeles.
He's also about to grab the Prime Catcher from the prizes if he takes them in order. So this Luminion could end up being very costly for Zane. There's the Prime Catcher grabbed from the prize cards. 2 energy in the prize cards, but there should still be enough for Brandon to close out the game with Lugia. So can Zane disrupt Brandon's hand? And is it even worth it, because there's a gift energy on the active and a gift energy on the Minccino? So what can you really do at this point? You can't Ghost and Iono in the same turn.
Yeah, and Zane honestly wants to take a 2-prize knockout this turn, because if he just takes a 1-prize knockout, he goes down to 3 prizes, and Brandon may not even need boss on this next turn. He can be content with taking a 1-prize knockout and then boss up not just the Luminion, but any of these 1-prize Pokemon in play. So this is where things are going to get tough. I'm sure Zane asking himself, was it worth it to play the Iono? Was it worth it to put Luminion into play? This could potentially cost him going to a 3rd and final game.
Yeah, Iono. When your opponent has gift energy on the active, you bring them down to 4 cards, and then they get an extra 4, right? 3 from the gift, 1 from their top deck. You need to go boss, so you needed the Luminion potentially to find one of those boss's orders to give yourself that advantage. Things just not looking great for Zane in this second game of top 4.
And only 1 double turbo energy down, so that means if there are multiple in the deck, we know Brandon is playing 3 copies. Even just 2 double turbo energy will be enough for this Lugia V-Star to knock out the Luminion. Do we see a stadium card? Is there the Collapse Stadium? Now, the only disadvantage of that is you also discard your opponent's Luminion in play, so it sort of acts as a neutral play.
There's a knockout.
We're just going to see the knockout onto Chinchino. Brandon's going to play through everything, play the gift energy, and I think Brandon has all the cards he needs to punch his ticket into the finals. He's going to look through the deck, use this Primal Turbo to power up Archeops. Just need to make sure there's enough energy cards in the deck. Let's take a look through. There's 2 Jet Energy and
there's
a double turbo. Brandon's got all the pieces. He'll power up this Lugia V-Star, play that Prime Catcher Ace-Spec, and punch his ticket into the final match with a powered-up Lugia V-Star. Brandon Baughn going the distance, and he will go into our final match.
The advantage that Zane was able to have by being the aggressor was nullified by that Luminion on the bench, allowed Zane to go 2-2 on the prize cards, his patience paying off and allowing him to move on to the final match.